All right, it is October 2nd, 2025. I've been a little lax on my journaling, but there's just kind of been a lot going on, and I'm not sure what exactly to articulate, so I'm just going to ramble a little bit on a few things because there's just so much to unpack. I'm trying to get back into work. I had a really interesting and illuminating and really helpful therapy session yesterday with my personal therapist. And I feel like I've come so far in being able to heal from a lot of stuff that I just wasn't addressing. And I'm really grateful to my husband for really pushing me to do this because it was causing a lot of conflict, not only in our relationship, but, I've struggled with interpersonal conflict and kind of being difficult, which is kind of hard sometimes because, especially in like professional settings and especially in science and academia, like difficult women, women that are like assertive and trying to like set boundaries and really be trying to dominate in their field, seem to be labeled as bitchy or difficult. And when men do it, it's like, oh, they're assertive and they're just doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it feels like that gets more rewarded. And I have always struggled with that intersection of, am I being too difficult? Am I projecting my trauma onto people? Am I being intolerant? Or am I just being perceived as such because I'm a woman? And so it's hard to like thread that needle in a misogynistic culture while also recognizing that I am pretty difficult and I do have a lot of stuff that I tend to like either take out on people or project onto people. And so I've been really grateful to go to therapy and do all that. I really wish I had done it sooner so that I could potentially be in a situation where I still have my tenure track, potentially having gotten tenure by now. I probably would have had it by now if I'd stuck with it, and be more at the forefront of this psychedelic renaissance. But I've also been thinking a lot about how the direction that psychedelic research has been moving in has just really not been sitting right with me. And I've noticed in my life when I'm really in alignment with something, like it flows really well, like it feels effortless. It doesn't feel like I'm constantly battling some impossible task. And not to say that things should always just be easy, and if they're not, you shouldn't do them. Like sometimes things are hard and you have to work a little bit to get it to work, to get it to function or move. And but it's just felt like almost adversarial at times, where I just feel like I've struggled with the fact that most of the principal investigators doing clinical research and at the professor, assistant professor, associate professor level in the psychedelic research community are mostly men, mostly white men. And I don't want to bring like sex and race into it, but that's just a fact. And I've been struggling with this because I felt like I was going to be the exception to that by being able to land a tenure track role in a psychiatry department at a major research university and getting federal funding, not to do psychedelic research, but other stuff. And really being able to like plant my tree of growth. I've always likened, humans being, like trees where, we are able to root ourselves, and, the deeper the roots, the taller the tree. And really trying to like, okay, so I've established myself, I have a PhD, I have a tenure track role, I have the support of a major academic institution, I've demonstrated myself to be able to get large multi-million-dollar federal grants that are like the pinnacle of success in that world, and like achieving all those goals so that I could branch out a little bit and do more riskier things like psychedelic research. And that wasn't something that my department chair was happy about, but she couldn't really stop me because of intellectual freedom and things like that when you're tenure track. One of the pieces of advice I was told from the university when I did like my faculty orientation that was sort of independent of any of our departments or department chairs was like, you have a lot of power right now before you get tenure. You have a ton of power once you get tenure, but while you're on the tenure track, they can't really touch you. Like, you have the ability to direct and guide what you want to do and the kind of mark you want to make. So take the opportunities, take the risks, do the things that are risky and innovative, because that's how you're going to make a name for yourself, and hopefully that's how you're going to get tenure. And so I felt very emboldened to do that, but it was met with a lot of conflict. But I moved forward anyway. There was like some hiccups where I got a grant and the university took it away because they didn't think the optics of it were good, which sucked. It was like a psilocybin grant for alcohol use disorder, which is ironic because it's being tested in clinical trials right now. But the University of Minnesota and the state of Minnesota has we're home to like the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation. So the regents were just not happy with the idea of giving people with substance abuse issues a Schedule I drug in a state that really isn't okay with medication-assisted therapy. I think Hazelden just very recently started using medication-assisted therapy. So anyway, that's another story. But so it was challenging. I was encouraged to pivot my research to do more like mechanistic healthy research because I wasn't a clinician. And so they're like, if you're going to be doing a clinical trial, you probably shouldn't be doing it with patients. And I was like, that's fine. The only reason I got into like patient work and studying that is because that felt like the way to push psychedelics forward. It just, when I first got into psychedelic research, nobody wanted to talk about mechanistic research. Nobody really cared how they worked or what they were doing to the brain, just like what could they potentially be used to treat. And I think that's the difference between like clinicians doing this kind of work versus like neuroscientists or scientists, where clinicians, they may not care how something works, they just want to know that it works and how to deliver it so that they can increase the quality of life and decrease suffering for their patients. And that makes sense. But scientists, like, if we're going to advance this and really figure out how to optimize this, we need to know all the details of how it works. And that's mechanistic research. And that's sort of what my expertise is rooted in, is I'm a neuroscientist and I'm trained in mechanism and I'm trained in plasticity and I'm trained in neurobiology. So I was like, cool, that sounds awesome. So I did a fun mechanistic research with psilocybin in healthy participants, not as controversial. That was actually garnering some excitement. Just for like being able to do what we would call like fundamental science and trying to understand the basics of how these things work. And that's really cool. But I struggled to get that funded. Like, I got small grants, little bit of institutional support that I used for my startup, which wasn't much. I think at the time I was hired, I got a $210,000 startup where a male colleague recruited at the same time got like $1 million. So there's that reality. And there's all kinds of politics around that and the way that negotiations happen. And anyway, so that didn't give me much to kind of start up with. So I got a small foundation grant to help pay for more, but really needed like millions of dollars to do the full study to make it sufficiently powered so that we had enough. I feel like I'm kind of derailing the topic on what I actually want to talk about. So anyway, once I had like felt like my tree was rooted, I started to grow. I had my large federal funding to do PTSD and machine learning research, which is sort of like the bread and butter of like why I have the credibility that I have, while trying to use that as like leverage and counterbalance like doing more risky stuff so that I wouldn't be seen as just this like crazy whack job scientist that's, this zealot or whatever. And so once I had gone through the bureaucratic maze of getting IRB approval, FDA approval, DEA approval, institutional approval to do the study, and got a little bit of funding and started enrolling participants in the trial, I decided that I wanted to have a baby. It's been a long goal of mine to be a mother. I've wanted to be a mother for a very long time. I spent a long time trying to figure out how to do it myself, but then got married and we decided we were going to do it together. And so at the end of 2021, after we'd enrolled our second participant, we started trying. And I felt like, okay, things are well oiled. My R01 that I had, this large federal grant that was doing PTSD research. I had a whole lab, I had staff, I had a postdoc, I had collaborators. That was running really well. The clinical trial was up and running. We had a little bit of money. We had all the approvals in place. The protocols were set up. We had our standard operating procedures. Like, it was running pretty well and we felt pretty good. So it's like, all right, now I can pile on this other thing and try to get pregnant. And I think it would have been fine to be pregnant and to potentially have a baby and deal with that. But I had a miscarriage. And that just sent me into a tailspin. And then I had another miscarriage and another miscarriage and another miscarriage. I had 4 miscarriages in the span of 2 years. And it just really affected my ability to focus and be motivated. I mean, it was trauma. It was grief. It was hard. I don't want to dig into it, but it just made it impossible to really, made my priorities shifted. It was hard. And things with my husband got difficult, and I was running a community organization, and that was just full of drama because the psychedelic ecosystem and the psychedelic communities are just, there's a lot of conflict there that I don't necessarily want to get into, of just polarization around what sorts of causes should people in the psychedelic community care about. Some people are we just need to talk about psychedelics, and it's yeah, psychedelics are supposed to make us give a shit. And we do, from my perspective, psychedelics help us be better people so we can fight for these difficult causes and make sure everybody is well and everybody is taken care of and our environment's taken care of, and really tapping us into how interconnected we all are so that we will give a shit and we will fight the hard fights when those come to our door or come to our friend's door or come to our neighbor's door. And given that the space is dominated by highly privileged individuals who, for lack of a better term, seem to have this mentality of good vibes only. They don't want to get embroiled in these lower energy bullshit things. I think a lot of people call it spiritual bypassing, where it's just I don't want to bother myself with the troubles of others or the problems of the world because I need to focus on my own spiritual development, which is just fucking ridiculous. Because yes, in the spirit of in a crisis, you need to make sure that your own needs are met before you can help others, or else you're going to burn out really hard and you're not going to be an effective helper or ally or resource or advocate when you are struggling to take care of your own basic needs. I mean, put your mask on before putting others on. And so I get it to an extent, but it's become a point where people just completely disconnect from what's happening around them in service of self-care and whatnot. And it's selfish in my opinion, and I'm not immune to that. I struggle with my own issues of just I only have so much capacity, but I've also spent a good chunk of my life giving so much of myself to my work, to my communities, to causes that I care about. When I started making more money, I'd give a lot of money to these things when I couldn't physically do things because I was too busy. But I burnt out hard given all of that combined with the miscarriages, and I crashed and burned so hard. And I've just been struggling with the fact that I feel I put so much effort and energy into things and they take off, but sort of leave me behind. And my old advisor, my postdoc advisor, when I was talking about this and just the fact that it keeps happening, he kind of mentioned that one, I feel you're sometimes just too early to things where it's too controversial or too scary. People aren't ready for it, but you kind of plant the seed and lay the groundwork. And he kind of likened me to a startup founder, where he's you create the infrastructure and the environment that is necessary for this to work, but by the time it's ready to grow, you've moved on to something else, because it's a lot of work to establish something and to seed that. And by the time it's actually taken root and started to grow, I'm just kind of sick of it. And I've been feeling that way about psychedelics, and also academia, the whole incentive structure of academia has been really challenging. Like I really started to push back on the publishing infrastructure because it's just such an exploitative industry that relies on free labor of like early career scientists and researchers to basically review papers for free for a highly profitable journal, and then they charge everybody to read it, and it's like they make so much money and just screw everyone else in the process. And so I started pushing back, I think at like mid 2020, where I just was like, I started asking for payment, when people would ask me to do a peer review for a journal, I would just be like, I think you should be paying us for this. And they would just be like, no, fine, we'll ask somebody else. And that just was the consistent response. And the more I started talking about this, the more people started like jumping on that bandwagon. And now there's like a whole movement now of just like, this industry sucks. Like how credible is the peer review process when we're asking a bunch of people to do the free work? Now people are outsourcing it to AI. The reviews that come back, the people they do get to find it that are willing to do it, maybe they're being a little lazy about it. It's not as rigorous as I would hope it is, because it's all in service of something that, like, we say is like credible and rigorous and peer reviewed, but it's like, who are the people that are actually doing the reviews, and are they doing it? I mean, they're doing it for free. Like, how do you know they're putting their best work in? Or the people that are really doing it really well are probably younger and maybe not as well trained in like all the methods that they need to be reviewing, because a lot of times professors get these requests and they outsource it to their postdocs or their grad students who don't have the same level of knowledge and training and expertise and experience. So I just started to kind of question the whole model, and then I just started getting rejection after rejection at the editorial level of every paper I was trying to publish. I would send it in and they would just be like, no. I think I got 20 rejections in a year, and they wouldn't even send it out for review, and it was just ridiculous. And even some of my co-authors would, like, the reasons for them not saying it were like, they're like, this is weird. So it was because you need to publish to establish yourself in sort of the public record in the public library of medicine, that when you submit a grant, you need to have all these papers to demonstrate that you've published work. You can have a return on investment, which apparently isn't necessarily, are we translating to things that are impacting and changing the field, rather than, are we publishing papers that people are reading and buying and paying for? And that seems to be the incentive structure. And all of that is needed to get tenure and to get promotion within academia. And I just really started to feel like that whole system is just rigged and stupid, and it just stopped being something that I wanted to invest so much in. And just with everything else going on, and combined with the fact that I started working on this governor's task force that was a purely volunteer gig that took up at minimum 5 hours of my time every month, which apparently to my department chair was too much free work, which I'm like, 5 hours a month? Like, that's not that much. But to her, that was unacceptable. And she kind of gave me an ultimatum of like, well, you can either chair the task force or you can continue on your tenure track. And I didn't like that ultimatum. So I decided to step away and close my lab. That wasn't the only reason, but it was kind of the nail in the coffin after I'd had multiple grants rejected, multiple papers rejected. I was experiencing burnout. I was very depressed. I had a nervous breakdown. I had to go on medical leave. Like, it just was all too much. And so I walked away, and I have been unemployed ever since. And then everything's been falling into chaos with this new administration not wanting to fund science, getting rid of funding, getting rid of experts that help to understand science and government decisions. And so it's just been a fucking shit show. And the most recent thing that pissed me off was basically, I've been feeling really good. I've been working on my own healing. I mean, things are devolving in our government and in our culture. Like, things are just nuts. Everybody's polarized by algorithms and living on their phone and not really in touch with like consensus reality. And I've been trying to just like stay aware of what's happening, read multiple sources of news to make sure I understand what's actually happening, not what the algorithm wants me to know is happening. And feeling good and, potentially have some opportunities for paid work coming through the pipeline, which feels good. And I was just having a nice little day to myself the other day, trying to just like sit by the lake and read a book and just, ground myself and kind of things that can keep me nourished while being able to have that so that I am strong enough to handle all the shit that's going on. And I was talking to a reporter who I did an interview with, and we've been trying to connect because he reports on psychedelics, and I was telling him about a potential job opportunity and like this project I've been trying to do with the VA that I'd previously tried to do with the rehab department at the U to basically give people with spinal cord injury psilocybin to look at safety, look at feasibility, and potentially look at whether it could help either with their mental health or potential like rehab, exercise endurance, things like that, because it does stimulate the muscles, which is a problematic side effect, but it could be something if done in the appropriate context with the right support and medical interventions and safety parameters in place, might actually help people be better at rehab and feel stronger and have more muscle tone, and which would increase bone density, which could have some good effects. And so it's an interesting study, but like we've tried to get it funded for like 3 years and everyone keeps rejecting it. And so I just kind of was telling him like this was an idea, and he was like, oh yeah, somebody in the psychiatry department at the University of Minnesota just got a state grant to do that. And I was like, what the fuck? So that really pissed me off because I'm literally the only person I know that has both expertise in spinal cord injury and psychedelics. And they didn't even bother to like consult with me. I've published on this. I've given talks about this. I've given grant rounds about this. I've been on spinal cord injury podcasts about this. And these people are just running with it without claiming to have no idea that I've been working on this. That I'm like, well, then you're not doing your due diligence in a field and a topic that you're trying to start a clinical trial with if you don't even understand what's already been happening in your own town, at your own institution. So I reached out to him and he just was like, kind of like pissed, just like, way to push original research, dude. Like, I've been trying to do this for a long time. Like, why didn't you even talk to me about this before moving forward? He's like, oh, I had no idea. If you want to help, let me know. And I'm like, I'll help you if you want to pay me off this grant you just got granted, a state-funded grant that we applied for and didn't get. And anyway, so I go to talk to my therapist yesterday and just kind of laying all this out, and she was just like, she did a little bit of like self-reflection or what do they call it? Self-disclosure, that like she had a similar thing where she was trying to like get into this like paranormal work, and she told somebody about it who thought she was crazy and it was stupid, and so she moved on. And then fast forward a couple years later, that woman's like at the forefront of doing paranormal research or paranormal stuff and making a name for herself. And she was just like, what the fuck? And she kind of had this epiphany of like, well, maybe that, like, I'm not the one to do that, but I'm the one to plant the seed so it gets done. And I feel like that's where I've had a really big impact, is like, since I moved to Minnesota and started the Psychedelic Society here, like so many people have embarked on their own like career transformation or lifestyle changes or things like that in the realm of psychedelics, decided to become a therapist, decided to open a ketamine practice, decided to become a psychedelic facilitator, decided to do whatever. It's been a lot. And I feel like when I was at Psychedelic Science in Denver in June, like, even though I feel like a lot of times I'm just invisible and I don't get noticed and nobody knows what I'm doing, I had so many people coming up to me being like, I'm so inspired by your work. I've been following you for a really long time, and the fact that you're like trying to push these systems, and the fact that you walked away from academia and you're really trying to take things in a different direction, like, it's so inspiring. And that felt really good to know that like I may not be getting the mass recognition that I think people think you need to like be successful in academia, but like the things that really I value of like the impact I want to make, that's happening. And I'm getting a little emotional because it's like, okay, I'm not getting the massive federal funding. I'm not getting invited to be keynote at big academic conferences, and I'm not getting job offers at scientific institutions to do this work, but I'm inspiring the underdogs and helping people feel like there's hope and there's another path and there's a way through this that doesn't involve selling your soul to the man. And that feels good. And yeah, just going back to like being a seed planter, being a startup founder, being somebody who lays the groundwork for amazing things to happen. And it's not about getting the credit, it's about making sure that these things see the light of day and that progress is made and impact is made and people are helped and people are inspired to create something for themselves, you know, like that adage of like, give a man a fish and he eats for one day, teach a man to fish and he can feed himself forever. And just feeling like the surface level stuff of like, oh, look at me doing all this stuff is more like feeding people versus like I've been helping inspire people to create something for themselves. And then they can go on to inspire others. And it's just like setting off this like shockwave that I hope is really helping to move the needle and hoping to change things and move things in a better direction. And really trying to do my own work of like my ego about like, what is the impact I want to have? How do I want to be remembered? Do I want to be remembered as the person on stage, or do I want to be remembered as somebody who inspired by living by example and other people witnessing my journey and the hard work that I've been doing and the hard battles I've been fighting, and being inspired to dig in as well. And that gives me hope and gives me some sort of like validation, but it isn't always easy and it isn't always obvious to see. And it just reminds me of like, you know, when I would get so demoralized doing animal work or working 100 hours a week when I was a postdoc and just be like, why the fuck am I doing this? It's so hard and I don't see the impact. I'm not getting the Nature paper. I'm not winning the awards. I mean, I've won some awards, but just like, there's just all these things where it's like, it doesn't feel like that impact is happening because I don't get the science paper published or I don't get the big fancy grant or whatever. But I forgot what I was saying with that. Damn it, I was onto a point. I feel like this is an ADD thing where it's like, I need to make sure before I make my point that you understand the full context of everything I say before I say it. And by the time I get to the point of putting all the context out, I've forgotten the point I was making. I'm sure if I go back and watch this, I'll understand it. But yeah, like I'm not getting the flashy things, but I'm doing things that are successful. I'm doing things that move the needle. I'm doing things that actually make a difference. And it was like, so I'd get so myopic about how hard all of it was and how much it was exhausting me, and I didn't feel like I was getting the praise or the recognition or the attention that I wanted from all that work, that if I just work 100 hours a week and I submit papers and I submit grants, that I will get all the things. And it's like, but that's not really what my value system wants. I think deep down at my core, in my soul, in my spirit, I want to be doing things that are helping people, that are actually making a difference, that are actually improving systems or changing systems or, you know, removing roadblocks or shutting down things that are dead ends. And when I go and interact with like somebody with lived experience or a patient, or see like somebody being like, thank you so much for doing this, or when there's a patient being like, I appreciate the scientists doing the hard work because it gives me hope that someday I will have a good treatment or improve my quality of life. And that has always been really effective at reinvigorating my motivation of like, that's why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this for myself. I mean, I want to get paid and be able to have my basic needs met. I need to be able to pay for housing and food if I'm going to be doing hard, labor intensive, exhausting work. But I also need, motivation. I need to have something that keeps me going, and the incentive structure of academia and the Western world of just like being showboaty and things like that is a false incentive, I think, to my soul. That isn't really what keeps me going. That isn't really what fuels me. That isn't what keeps my fire going. What keeps my fire going is the root of the cause, which is helping people address these gnarly, gnarly problems and helping them find a way through it in whatever context that is. And so that gives me hope. And yeah, and I think having, a lot of people keep saying, like, even just me stepping away from academia to take care of myself has been inspiring. That, like, I burnt out so hard. I tried to do the thing. I tried to do the, like, patriarchal, hierarchical, want to climb the ladder, be at the top of the mountain, running my lab, being the expert, being the whatever. And it just fucking, like, took everything from me. It just destroyed me. And I was forced to bow out and finally take care of myself and go to therapy and heal. And that has been inspiring to people, and that feels good because it's taken a while. But I feel like I'm finally seeing the way that I handled finding out that this person was doing this psychedelics for spinal cord injury study. I think me a year or two ago would have just lost my shit, raged at everybody, posted some shit on LinkedIn or other things, sent out a mass email to everyone in the department, contacted everyone I know in the field to throw this person under the bus as an unethical person. I didn't do that. I started to draft something, and then I was like, let me just sit and calm down for a second. I regulated myself so good. And even Brian, he was like, you handled that so well. And he's been really impressed with my growth and my healing. And it's just and I think that's powerful to be able, especially now with things being so hard, to just be able to sit with really, really hard stuff and not completely lose your shit. Because I think it's really powerful when you can have that rage and not let it control you, and use it strategically to actually fight, and fight in a way that's going to be effective and not in a way that's going to be destructive. So, and at the end of the day, I'm just glad that somebody's focusing on this issue, because it's a big safety risk for people with spinal cord injury. And I feel like I know a lot about this, and I just want to make sure people understand what they're getting into. And I also want to help because it sounds interesting and cool, but I also just trust that the opportunities that I'm supposed to be working on will unfold for me, because those are the things I need to be focusing on. I feel like the consistent message I get is that I'm given what I need that aligns with what I'm supposed to be doing here in this world. And it doesn't always match up with the things that I want, with the things that I think I want, because I don't think I know what I want or what I'm actually supposed to be doing. But I feel like my life has always had a way of keeping me on this path that I'm supposed to be on, whether it's destiny or a soul contract or whatever. I'm here for a purpose, and I'm given what I needed to fulfill that purpose. And for the last year or so, that purpose has been get your fucking own house in order, because you are going to be really effective at what you do, but you need to stop being a source of destruction, which I have been very destructive. And I think now I have more capacity and nervous system regulation and emotional maturity to handle a harder path that's lying ahead, but one that is going to really, make an impact. And so I'm hopeful and grateful for the things, even if they feel like losses or failures. I can see them as opportunities for growth and opportunities to make sure I'm staying aligned with what I'm supposed to be doing and not getting distracted by the shiny things. So that was a long rant, and I'm glad I finally got to my point. And yeah, even though everything feels like it's going to shit, I don't know that I've ever felt so just good in my body, even though I'm getting old and I'm approaching perimenopause and I'm feeling some changes. Like, I feel capable. I don't feel so totally controlled by my past and my triggers and my trauma and my emotions. Like, and that feels good. Feels like I've been like hitting the gym, like I feel strong, I feel capable. I feel like I can endure things. I feel like I can handle things in a way that isn't gonna like destroy another person. Because like, sure, I can fight and I can rage, but at what cost? I don't want to be burning other people to fuel my cause. That's not how this shit should work. So